are not going to want to miss this conversation that we had with my business partner and co-founder of Minerva, Dr. Betty Murray, PhD, MS, who is the CEO of Minerva Project, a femtech and virtual care platform providing perimenopause and menopause care with AI-driven personalization using labs, wearables, and symptoms to create personalized treatment in all 50 states. Dr. Murray is a women's health researcher and nutritionist with over 22 years of experience leading integrative medical teams. In 2006, Dr. Murray founded Living Well Dallas Functional Medicine Clinic, the first integrative functional medicine center in North Texas. Dr. Murray is a sought-after speaker, author, appearing on Fox News, NBC, and Bloom TV. She also hosts the Menopause Mastery podcast. Stay tuned for Dr. Betty. Welcome to the Power Up Your Life podcast, brought to you by GoBundance Women. I'm Kelly Resendez.
And I'm Mandy McAllister.
And we have one of my favorite humans on with us, my business partner and co-founder of Minerva, Dr. Betty Murray. How are you?
Oh, I'm fabulous today.
Awesome. Well, we are just grateful that you could spend some time with us today and would love for you to share just a little bit about your background and what caused you to create Minerva.
Well, it really came out of really two separate events. So I had kind of the storied reinvention career. So anybody that's worried about reinventing themselves, I've done that multiple times. But I was swept in the technology boom in the early 90s. And while I was working there as the first woman hired to answer to the CTO, working 100 hours a week, getting paid half as much as my male counterparts, killing myself quite literally, I was diagnosed with colitis. And, I'd had digestive problems, but, it really kind of flared up during that stressful time period. And I asked the doctor what I thought was a legitimate question. Could I change my diet and change the trajectory of this disease? Because, you go in and all of a sudden you're going to be on all these meds and it's going to suppress your immune system. And he literally leaned forward and barked this huge laugh in my face and says, it has nothing to do with what you eat. And I was like, well, that sounds like complete and utter crap. And so I went home, and this is the stuff I read about, like probably a lot of the people that listen to your podcast. So I went back and started taking classes in nutrition and biochemistry, and that's where things clicked. And so I ended up leaving the corporate world, starting a clinic, becoming one of the first integrative clinics in North Texas 22 years ago. When I hit my 40s, I had a tubal because I didn't want to be on birth control anymore. And what I didn't realize then, hindsight's wonderful, is that what it was going to do was accelerate my trip into perimenopause and menopause. And pretty much overnight, within 6 months, I started getting massive amounts of acne. My hair starts falling out. My periods get all kinds of wonky, and I gain about 35 pounds. Now, mind you, I had been a bodybuilder at one point in my life. I was in that community for years. I knew how to manipulate diet. I'm a nutrition professional, and I could not for the life of me figure this out. And despite having medical professionals in my clinic that were functional medicine practitioners and access to everybody you read about because they were friends, nobody for over a decade could help me. I ended up going back and getting a PhD because I was like, I need to dig into what is unique about women's hormones and how our body operates with them, because so many women had similar experiences. And so Minerva was really born out of that pain. I was like, if it sucks for me for over a decade, what does it feel like for everybody else? And I already knew, but I was like, there's got to be more than just one-on-one. We got to do something where we really change women's paradigm.
Yeah, wow. It's an incredible story. I mean, so many of us learn through hardships, right? And then we start to solve problems that, come as a result of those. So, we have some exciting news. We've got 2 new things hitting the market with Minerva, and would love for you to share a little bit about what those are.
Yeah, I would say the first one is we are launching a book called Just Right. And it really is about reclaiming. Yes, we both have it on the galley copies, woo! And it really is, it's a quick read. So it's not one of those things, I don't know about you, but I love to read, but I also find it hard to make it through a book with everything else competing. But it really is a way to take inventory of what's happening in your life, both physically, mentally, and emotionally and spiritually, and to understand what's happening in your body's physiology and to really start taking this proactive step. I know I'm kind of speaking for Kelly. I believe women in this time period, we have an extraordinary amount of agency, access, and assets. And we have to know how to put those things together to really create the life that we want, but we have to feel good in order to do that. So that book is designed for that. And then we are launching a reinvention of our telemedicine in all 50 states, which is very exciting, with new clinical partners and access to some very wonderful bioidentical hormones in an organic jojoba oil base. I'm really excited about this. This has been a long time coming and a lot of work for a lot of people.
Has been so fun to watch both of you dig into this thing that you're so passionate about. And I, having come from, working in medicine, know that women's bodies weren't studied really until the 90s. So what you guys are doing is revolutionary, not just for, ladies of a certain age, but for all generations to come. I'm curious, I'm 45 and, we've had conversations about this and things, they are changing, Betty. Who is it that needs this service? Who is someone that needs to look into these bioidentical hormones or this, what you guys are launching here?
Yeah, so it really goes into about, 3 different time periods in your life. So the truth is as early as your mid to late 30s, you can start experiencing hormone changes associated with the transition of fully cycling, everything's balanced, to perimenopause to menopause. And so, we know from recent studies that literally survey participants, like a third of them were experiencing what we would consider perimenopausal symptoms: hot flashes, night sweats, mood changes, insomnia. So the reality is even if you're like 35, 38 and you're like, I think something's getting weird, and I don't know what's going on, you probably are in that transition phase. The average woman will spend 8 years. That's a bell curve. So some of us get 14 and some of us get like 3, right? It's just kind of how it works. So younger women who may be experiencing hormonal imbalance that leads to all kinds of symptoms, especially the women that are in your kind of 40s range. This is where we know that the hormones are starting to decline. So progesterone declines. So you get insomnia and sleep issues. You get a little more anxious, a little more worked up. You probably don't get hot flashes yet. And in perimenopause, we usually get what looks like neurological symptoms: mood changes, depression, anxiety, memory problems, brain fog, extraordinary fatigue. That is a sign, right? And then as you go into menopause, where estrogen, I like to call it the bungee cord, estrogen's all over the place. So you start getting all these other symptoms. You might get, vaginal dryness and pain on sex, joint pain, fatigue, all the other things add up to weight gain. But at that point, often people wait until they have their period stop before they get on hormones. And that's the last thing you want to wait for. Because the reality is you want to start long before the periods stop, because the acceleration of bone loss, the acceleration of cardiovascular aging, and changes in the brain start to occur years in advance. So for any woman in that time period at all, you have the right to ask about your hormones and explore them for you, regardless of what age you really are, because it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, so powerful. Part of why we wrote Just Right is that we witness a lot of women that don't feel great in their bodies. They feel not enough. They feel too much. They don't feel just right. And we believe that this is critical to women really just up leveling leadership, capital raising, other things. So share a little bit more about like the underlying reason why we're really doing this.
Yeah, like I said, there's 50 million women in the United States that qualify as perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause. 6,000 a day go into menopause. And the truth is our leadership, our decision making, the growth of companies depend on women and men, but I would say women especially, moving into these roles. And when your brain isn't working and you're having, crime scene periods, and you break out in a hot flash every time you have to stand in front of a room, and then you get home and you're overwhelmed and you're probably caring for children and, an adult child that might be a partner and another adult that might be an ailing parent. When all that occurs, women start to shrink. They go, okay, I can only take on so much. So I just am not going to do that. And the first thing we do, we give up our dreams and our hopes and our desires for our careers for other people at our expense. And corporate America, growth in the United States, and I think in the planet pays for it because women perform fantastically. Women founded companies outperform male founded companies by 62%. But we can't do that if the time period that is so important to our careers, which is often in this second half, we can't get it together because we feel terrible.
Reach. This hits so hard and speaks directly to me, and I'm sure to so many of our listeners. So it matters so much to us on this podcast, and you've been a guest before. So these actionable steps. So talk to the woman who's maybe 45 with kids and parents, and it has the brain fog. What are the actionable steps that she should be taking? The Power Up Your Life podcast is powered by GoBundance Women. I could tell you stuff about it, or you could hear from some of our members. Here you go.
GoBundance has connected me with an amazing group of entrepreneurial women that I can learn from and support and grow together.
GoBundance gave me a boardroom of sisters who refused to let me settle.
Within the first 2 months of me being a member, I enrolled someone to help them with their high ticket sales. I got double back my investment within the first, 60 days of being a member. So it's incredible. You guys are just amazing, and there's always somebody to look up to in GoBundance. So I love being a member.
That's why you owe it to yourself to check out GoBundanceWomen.com. So talk to the woman who's maybe 45 with kids and parents, and it has the brain fog. What are the actionable steps that she should be taking?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing you have to identify is the fact that you probably have an OB-GYN that you have used for everything under the sun, because that's kind of what we do as women. And the first thing you want to do is assess if they're possibly capable of helping you in this zone. Only 1/3 of any OB-gynecology medical school programs even have an hour of menopause training. So it is likely that who gave birth to helped you birthing your children or took care of you for these ongoing years has zero capacity to actually treat the next 30 years of your life. Right. So this is the time where you start getting your team. It's usually not one person. You're going to want somebody who is hormone educated, perimenopause and menopause informed provider. And you may need a health coach, and you may need a nutritionist, and even a trainer that understands our body works differently. The next thing is, I think it's really important, especially if you're in your mid 40s, to get some hormone testing and see kind of where you're at. Because the other side of it is we have a hormone symphony. So when your sex hormones, I like to call them the wind section, right? So imagine we have an orchestra. When they're starting to go all over the place and play off key, it is likely that your percussion and your brass section and everybody else is going to shift to bring balance, right? They want harmony. And so many women are struggling with excess cortisol, failing thyroid levels on top of sex hormone changes. And doctors will tell you 3 things. They'll say, we can't test your hormones. They change every day and we can't figure that out. And I'm like, okay, we have, Aura rings that can determine where your sex hormones are and kind of where you are in your cycle. We have devices like Mira that we can literally track at home. We have apps that, we've been able to figure out fertility using apps. Hello. And so the reality is we can test hormones. And so you need full sex hormone panels, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, free and total, estrone. We need your entire thyroid panel, right? We need to know what they're doing. We need a complete metabolic panel and your cholesterol and lipids, hemoglobin A1C, because often at this time, we're also experiencing weight gain. And we'll see more insulin resistance, and your blood sugar often doesn't show that. So your doctor says, oh, your blood sugar is 95, you're fine. But what we don't know is what your insulin is. And so I think it's really important to get labs. And if you're still cycling, you want to try and get them day 19 through 21 from the first day of your last cycle. So if you start today and your period starts, that's day 1. You want to count out about 19 to 21 days. If you average like a 28-day-ish cycle, because that's when the hormones are peaking. And at that point, we can tell, Are they in tandem with each other? Because that's where the problem comes in. It's not your absolute level of a particular hormone, it's their relative relationship to each other.
Yeah. And these are all things that most people just are not educated on. And
No.
unless you take the time to research it, you just won't know how to feel just right. So, I want to dig into like, what are some of the myths that, are out there around hormone replacement therapy and what's the truth?
Yeah. So the first myth, and this is a myth that we've been fighting for 22 years, it's the myth that estrogen replacement therapy in perimenopause and afterwards causes breast cancer. There are no studies prior to the Women's Health Initiative that was started in 1997 and ended in 2002 that has ever shown estrogen to be causal for breast cancer. And in fact, in their own study, the women that were on estrogen alone in the Women's Health Initiative had a 26% reduced risk of breast cancer compared to the women who were doing nothing at all. It was specifically one drug that we don't use anymore. It's called Prempro, that has a synthetic medroxyprogestin, which is not like our progesterone. And that drug increases the risk for breast cancer, increases the risk for stroke and heart attack, and shouldn't be used, particularly in perimenopause and menopause. And here's the thing, like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, how can that be? We give out birth control and, and different forms of birth control like candy with no regard, no testing, no nothing. You go in, they're like, here, take a pill, bye, get out, which is a synthetic hormone that irreversibly binds to the receptor. That's how they work, right? Our natural hormones don't do that. They kind of pop onto the receptor like a key and they lock and unlock and then they let go. We do that from 18 to somewhere near your 50s. And then all of a sudden, medical world, because of one study said, that's totally fine. But the day you turn 50 and your period stops, your hormones or any bioidentical hormones are now deadly. That defies logic. And it is not true. Our hormones, especially when they're bioidentical, which means they're chemically exactly like what they make, they protect us from osteoporosis. They protect us from vascular aging, heart attack, and stroke. They protect us from Alzheimer's and dementia. And they are also protective against breast cancer. And even tamoxifen, right? So tamoxifen is one of the most classically used treatment, particularly in women who are not menopausal, to preserve bone post-chemotherapy in breast cancer. It is what we call a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modulator. So it hangs on to a particular keyhole for estrogen. It is like a synthetic estrogen. And what it does biochemically in your body is it actually raises your own estrogen 5 times. Now, let that sit for a moment. Our treatment for estrogen sensitive breast cancer until the more recent chemotherapy was high dose estrogen. We have been told that for 2 decades. And so women have had stroke, heart attack, Alzheimer's, dementia, osteoporosis, frailty, dying of urinary genital syndrome that becomes a urosepsis. Women are dying because of a lie.
Yeah. I think it's such an interesting point that there's no testing that happens before you put, even a kid on birth control pills. I'm someone who has a genetic mutation that I had blood clots because of it. It's interesting that this care on this other side of life is not as, allowed for. I'm curious, you talked about this being a rebrand or a relaunch. How is this different? And how is this different? Because there are, maybe some other groups out there. How is Minerva different?
Yeah, we're different in a lot of ways. So let me kind of address the relaunch. We have been working very diligently for the last year with a partnership to bring, basically a bioidentical hormone. So again, identical to what your body makes in an organic jojoba oil base. So that means it has 2 ingredients. It's got hormone and organic jojoba oil. Jojoba oil is real important because it actually is a lot like your waxy oil that your skin produces. So it absorbs very rapidly and absorbs very well. Topical creams with hormones like testosterone and compounded creams don't generally absorb very well. I was always frustrated with the fact that a lot of even the bioidentical forms of hormones were actually in endocrine disrupting chemicals. They've got solvents, they've got other things that are emulsifiers to keep it suspended in a cream. And so we've been working very diligently to to bring that to the market on top of additional functional medicine training in hormone metabolism, which is where my PhD really resided. It was looking at not only how do we make sure our hormones are at the right levels in blood work, but also looking at how your body packages them to get rid of them, which is very important because that's more about how your body really responds to your hormones. And the other side of it, we changed a little bit of how we work with people to be able to stabilize the prescription management. Right. So prescriptions, depending on where you are in what state, one woman could go to CVS and get a patch and it might be $30. Another woman, it might be $200. Another woman across the country, she can't even get it. And another woman will get it and it'll be something else. So we've been able to negotiate a pass through for pharmaceuticals. And so it's part of how we work with people in our subscription model, which means that you're not finding out, oh, there's a patch deficient, there's a patch out of stock. Like we have a patch out of stock that we anticipate will be at least 16 more months, right? So that means you're on a hormone, then you can't get it filled. So what it enabled us to do is be able to provide for our patients in a much more rapid way a hormone that is in an organic base, and also reduce some of that sort of, financial burden where you don't know what it's going to be each time because it's different. Because not used by insurance.
And to expand on that a little bit, like our appointments aren't a drive-through. A lot of our competitors, and there's no judgment for the way that they do business, but there are competitors that are not even meeting with patients and they're prescribing HRT. And then there's ones that are doing it in super quick appointments. And, it's important to us that women are heard and seen. And so these are going to be, the hour-long appointment where you can really share everything that's really going on with you. So that is definitely one of our biggest differentiators, alongside of having the nutritionist, the coach that's riding, along this journey with you. So, Betty, one of the things that, we always like to ensure that our audience hears is like, what is something unconventional that you've done in business? So like, let's leave the medicine out of it. What are some of your business strategies that maybe some people might think are a little unconventional?
I don't know if I would call it unconventional, but, I've owned a clinic for 22 years. And when I started, it was before the newsletter land. It was before social media. And, I opened that on a whole lot of bravado and naivete. I'm going to be really honest. I was like, of course, this is what medicine should be. I had no idea there was no tribe. And I learned very quickly, because I did not have a financial runway, that I was going to have to get crafty, right? I was going to have to get real crafty to build a tribe and educate. And so I built our business locally in the North Texas area through public speaking, right? And I would say that a lot of people will look at starting a business and the first thing they think about is, how do I get new leads and how can I run ads on Instagram and how can I just crank leads through the door? And what I can tell you is, even the other people I know in this industry, the reality is you are always stronger locally than you will be nationally. And that if you are starting a business, do not overlook your local community, even if you can deliver anywhere, right? Because you have a big community and a big relationship, and people will always do business with somebody they feel more connected to. And what better way to start out than to remember you have a local footprint, you have a local set of friends, you have a local, multiple reaches that you have. And I think it's very easy to look at, I got to do all these cold prospecting, which can become really expensive. And also, you never know when the algorithm's going to change, right? Your ads start working, then they stop working. That you never ever want to give up some of those low-hanging fruits that require a little bit of work on your part, but are probably higher ROI per person and per impact. And I think that's the thing that I find a lot of people struggle with, because they're looking at the new fancy object. Ooh, can I do AI ads? Ooh, can I do this? And I'm like, don't forget to go speak somewhere locally, probably.
Right. I think there's so much wisdom in that, right? Like going the inch wide and a mile deep. If you reach some critical mass, you're going to hit a tipping point faster. And then things can spread like wildfire nationally if you have it locally first. Betty, I adore you in so many different directions, that not the least of which is your way of putting things into words. Your crime scene period ideas that I'm just going to giggle until later tonight about. But my favorite thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is that, just that when we know better, we do better, right? That we can either get pissed off at what has happened in medicine and how women have been led astray in terms of hormones, or we can look to the future and figure out the next right step to, getting out of brain fog, to living a better life. Kelly, what was your favorite part of the conversation today?
Yeah, I mean, all of it. Can I say that? Because I believe as women, we are the most powerful force in the world. And that's not putting our male counterparts down, but we do wear a lot of hats and we can wear them simultaneously. Women in our feminine energy just differ from men in their masculine. And when you talk about just how important it is that women step into their power at this critical time in their life, like it really is sending a message that we must educate ourselves and really just inform ourselves if this is the right path for us. So that definitely was my greatest takeaway.
One thing that we love to do is you've served us. We want to serve you. What is an introduction or a resource that might change the ballgame for you that Kelly and I might help with, or any of our listeners?
Well, Kelly and I definitely want to meet Oprah. We want Oprah to have us on to talk about this book.
I just manifested her saying that.
We're manifesting Oprah being really interested. I think, for me personally, I love public speaking. Like I have done comedy and improv. So anybody that's seen me speak knows that's true. So if anybody is like, gosh, I need somebody to come talk about women's health, I would love that. I would love that. I love to be on stage and share wisdom.
And you're an amazing entertainer as you do it.
Yeah.
And, the one thing that I love too, Mandy, which I miss saying, is she makes rage seem like it's a really great thing. Like a lot of times when you're like rageful, like that is part of what got Minerva going, right? And I think it's in a humorous way because, like you said, Mandy, we can't go backwards and we can only move forward. So, Betty, thank you so much for joining us today. If somebody's interested in finding out more about the hormones, where do they go?
Yeah, the easiest place to come check us out is gethormonesnow.com. Real easy to remember. What do you need? Gethormonesnow.com.
Yay! And you can find Just Right on Amazon coming out here pretty soon. So thank you so much for joining us. If this was a powerful conversation, make sure that you share it with your friends. We all need to educate each other on this important mission in empowering women. And we will see you on the next episode of Power Up Your Life.
Thanks for joining us today on the Power Up Your Life podcast. If you got value from today's episode, make sure that you like and subscribe and send this episode to someone who needs to hear some wins like this. If you need to power up your business, head over to Power Up Your Life Now, where you can see all of the resources that our team has to power up your business. We'll see you on the next episode.